What are they going to do? Maybe they're okay, they leave us alone, or they put us in the trunk and you're gone. You cannot even tell your family you're gone.
Beneath layers of dust, soil, and silence, fragments of a vanished empire are clawing their way back into the light. Not from museums or archives, but from jungles, frozen islands, and behind crumbling walls in unsuspecting homes. Some findings defy logic. Others rewrite the ending we thought we knew. A coded machine disguised as a typewriter. A relic was discovered in a place it could never have arrived by chance. These aren't just remnants. They're messages left behind, buried with intention. One, in particular, sat hidden in plain sight for over 70 years. Its location impossible, its existence denied. Until now. What was once lost is no longer. Enigmas from the deep. Beneath the cold waters of the Baltic Sea, a remarkable chapter of World War II history was rediscovered in recent years, one tangled in fishing nets, encrusted in algae, and nearly mistaken for an old typewriter. Divers scanning the seabed for ghost nets near Gelting Bay stumbled upon a rusted, oddly intact device. It turned out to be an Enigma machine, the iconic cipher tool used by Nazi Germany to encrypt its most sensitive military communications. Once central to the German war effort, these machines were seldom recovered intact, especially from the ocean depths. Their rediscovery decades later offers a powerful reminder of the technological arms race beneath the surface of World War II and the enduring mystery that still clings to the seabed. The Enigma machine was one of the wonders of mechanical engineering. It worked on the principle of rotors or wheels to transform plain text messages into unrecognizable codes. Each time a letter was typed, an electric signal traveled through a maze of shifting circuits so that no letter in any message was encoded the same way twice. Such a constantly changing cipher was extremely difficult that it took the Allies years of code-breaking work at Bletchley Park, alongside early computers and gifted mathematicians such as Alan Turing, for any chance of unlocking the intercepted communications. The Enigma machines had been used in the entire spectrum of the German forces, from U-boats prowling the Atlantic to the Luftwaffe coordinating air raids over Europe. Near the end of 1945, facing a near defeat, the German armed forces were desperate to destroy everything that was sensitive to keep it away from the Allied reach. Thousands of Enigma machines were scuttled along with ships, burned or smashed by retreating troops. Much instruction was passed to German U-boats to make them sink themselves with any equipment that may fall into the enemy's hands. Some of the few machines surviving that had not suffered this fate were lost to the ocean, usually buried or eventually forgotten, or in some instances due to the chaotic nature of the scuttling process, like with discoveries from the Baltic Sea. Just when you think the ocean has given up its last secret, the Arctic ice reveals a Nazi outpost that was never supposed to exist. Ghosts of the Arctic. Amid the frozen wilderness of Alexandra Land in the Russian Arctic, a chilling fragment of World War II history lay hidden for over 7 decades, until 2016, when a team of Russian researchers uncovered the remnants of Schatzgräber, a long-rumored secret Nazi weather station. Built in 1943, this outpost formed part of an elaborate, clandestine network established by Nazi Germany to gather vital meteorological data. In the harsh Arctic environment, weather patterns developed days before reaching Western Europe. For the German Navy and Luftwaffe, gaining early access to accurate forecasts offered a significant tactical edge. This data influenced everything from submarine routes to the timing of aerial attacks, making control over Arctic weather intelligence a surprisingly strategic objective. The conditions under which German personnel lived at Schatzgräber were grueling. Despite its remote and hostile environment, the outpost was not merely a temporary camp. When the researchers began excavating the site, they found over 600 artifacts that confirmed a well-established long-term occupation. These included bunkers, bullet casings, uniforms, gas canisters, machine gun fragments, and even paper documents bearing Nazi insignia, remarkably well preserved in the Arctic cold. The presence of landmines and defensive structures indicated that the station was not just scientific, but militarized, prepared for possible discovery or attack. Food tins, medical supplies, and heating equipment also shed light on the day-to-day reality of surviving in one of the world's most extreme climates. In an ironic twist, it was not Allied forces, but a fatal blunder in the station's survival strategy that sealed its fate. In 1944, the men stationed at Schatzgräber ran out of rations and resorted to eating freshly slain polar bear meat. What they did not know was that the undercooked meat contained lethal parasites that caused a massive outbreak of trichinosis in the crew. Suffering from acute illness, the entire station had to be evacuated by U-boat, a perilous endeavor by any measure. The outpost was never returned to. For decades after, the existence of Schatzgräber remained in speculation until climate change and unusually warm Arctic summers revealed its buried remains. The discovery of Schatzgräber not only validated a lost chapter of Nazi military undertakings, but also illuminated the larger geopolitical significance of the Arctic during World War II. In negatively impacted operations like the D-Day landings, the side able to better forecast weather gained a critical edge. The station serves as testimony to Germany's efforts to dominate not just on land, but also on oceans and in the air, wherever nature would be in play. Today, as global powers re-enter the Arctic with strategic interests, this forgotten Nazi outpost stands as a reminder that cold fronts were once part of a very hot war. Frozen in steel. In the depths of the North Sea and the waters off Sicily, history lies frozen in steel. Torn fuselages and shattered cockpits of long-lost Nazi aircraft preserved in silence. One of the most extraordinary recoveries in recent years was that of the Heinkel WW2, a rare German night fighter pulled from the seabed near Denmark. Only a few hundred of these planes were ever built, and they were among the most advanced interceptors of their time. The recovered wreck was of particular interest to aviation historians because it contained remnants of its radar system, equipment that had been missing from all museum-held models of the aircraft. These antenna arrays were once used to detect Allied bombers under the cover of darkness, making the WW2 a deadly presence in the night skies over Europe. Equally significant was the underwater salvage of a Junkers Ju-88 bomber found off the coast of Capo Passero, Sicily. This versatile twin-engine aircraft was a mainstay of the Luftwaffe, serving in roles ranging from level bombing to night fighting. Divers who reached the wreck found the cockpit astonishingly well preserved, with control panels, oxygen bottles, and even parts of the pilot's seat intact. The discovery allowed experts to study the aircraft's configuration in detail, offering new insight into wartime flight conditions, visibility challenges, and emergency protocols. Many of the instruments, long corroded in other recovered models, were found in recognizable form, protected by the plane's placement on the sea floor. Certainly, the most magnetic relics were the personal artifacts that came to light under these aircraft. Among the wreckages were found flight goggles, handwritten notes, ration tins, and even a half-smoked cigar. All this lay scattered around, making these mechanical tombs a deeply human experience. Such things glitter a history about the early men who flew such machines, young, disciplined, and caught up in one of the most furious air campaigns of modern warfare. Such findings have been useful to historians and forensic scientists to trace deployments, crew identities, and even reconstruct final flight paths before doom struck an aircraft. They no longer tell technical tales, but instead whisper the personal cost of war. Modern technology is, in a way, the lifeblood that sustains these very stories. With advanced sonar mapping, X-ray scanning, and 3D imaging capabilities, teams are able to locate, document, and reconstruct what would have been thought of as utterly lost aircraft. These same tools also help preserve the delicate construction, allowing scientists to virtually reconstruct damaged cockpits or radar arrays while keeping them undisturbed. Now, slowly, with the help of restoration teams, these World War II relics from the deep are transforming from badly corroded wrecks into colorful historical witnesses. Rather, they are not simply debris of war, but are interpreted carefully as artifacts of human genius, conflict, and survival. Weapons of vengeance. In the quiet fields of Kent, England, an extraordinary excavation unearthed the remains of one of Nazi Germany's most terrifying innovations, the V-2 rocket. Using wartime maps, aerial reconnaissance photos, and historical trajectory data, a team of archaeologists tracked down the impact site of a V-2 that veered off course in February 1945. Buried more than 20 feet underground, the debris included 2 combustion chamber burners and fragments of the missile's fuselage. This find provided tangible evidence of the destructive power launched from the European mainland and delivered insight into the rocket's construction. While the rocket in question failed to reach its intended target, it served as a grim reminder of how close these early ballistic weapons came to reshaping warfare entirely. Technically, the V-2 was a revolutionary leap in weaponry. It was the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile and the first man-made object to travel faster than the speed of sound. Powered by a liquid fuel engine, the V-2 could soar to altitudes of over 50 miles and reach speeds exceeding 3,500 mph before plunging toward its target. Its guidance system, though primitive by modern standards, was advanced for its time, using gyroscopes and steering vanes to maintain trajectory. Unlike bombers, it could not be intercepted or heard before impact, making it a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. The excavation in Kent confirmed the complexity of its design and the advanced metallurgy involved in constructing these early missiles. The V-2 rocket after the war became the basis of missile and space programs that continued to develop, especially in the US and Soviet Union. The race to capture V-2 technology and personnel became known as Operation Paperclip. Werner von Braun and dozens of other V-2 engineers were brought to America. Their know-how was directly responsible for the development of U.S. intercontinental ballistic missiles, and, later on, NASA's space program with Saturn V, which took the Apollo astronauts to the moon. So the legacy of the V-2 is paradoxical, begotten from war, and yet taking humanity's first important step into space. The blaze of destruction that goes by the name V-2 was in store for civilians of London and other cities directly targeted by it. During 1944 to 1945, over 1,400 such V-2s were aimed at Britain, and total deaths amounted to over 5,000, while thousands more were left injured. The rockets struck as if stealing into space, razing houses, and setting the stage for terror to unfold. Entire neighborhoods lived in constant fear of an invisible enemy falling from the sky. Today, the unearthed debris of those weapons serves as a stark memorial to the trauma they inflicted, and to the unprecedented fusion of science and destruction that defined the V-2 project. Recovered Nazi emblems. Among the most striking relics recovered from the remnants of Nazi Germany is the bronze eagle from the Admiral Graf Spee. A German pocket battleship scuttled off the coast of Uruguay in 1939. Weighing over 770 pounds and bearing a prominent swastika, this massive emblem symbolized the pride and might of the Kriegsmarine. When it was pulled from the River Plate decades later, the find was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. For historians, it was a rare and intact artifact of naval history. For others, it was a painful reminder of tyranny. Its recovery sparked immediate debate. Should such a powerful symbol of oppression be displayed, hidden, or destroyed? The object's fate remains caught between historical preservation and ethical caution. The Graf Spee eagle is far from the only surviving Nazi emblem. Across Europe, swastikas and other Nazi insignia have been found embedded in architecture, carved into stone walls, and painted on the interiors of former military vessels and buildings. In some cases, they were deliberately hidden under post-war renovations, while in others, they were left intact as silent witnesses to history. Public buildings once commandeered by the Nazi regime often still bear traces of these marks. Ironwork eagles above doors, mosaic swastikas beneath floorboards, or crests embedded in stained glass. These discoveries often come unexpectedly during restoration or demolition projects, prompting a fresh reckoning with the symbols etched into the infrastructure of the past. Those symbols were not for decoration, but were instruments of ideological warfare. The Nazis used these symbols to assert their presence in conquered areas, elevate their authority over the people, and threaten them. The swastika in particular was omnipresent, on uniforms, official documents, on government buildings, and on military equipment. It was much more than national pride was really a matter of dominance, destruction of culture, while totality meant suffocation in the mass media. The regime wanted to normalize its rule and repress local identity by flooding the visual environment with Nazi iconography. In territories conquered, such symbols were often placed over, or instead of local flags and coats of arms, as if to indicate conquest and submission. Currently, the question of what to do with these recovered symbols remains deeply contested. Some advocate for their preservation and exhibition in museums with adequate historical context for the education of future generations. Others favor their destruction, fearing they could possibly inspire modern extremist ideologies. In Germany, laws strictly govern the public display of Nazi symbols while allowing exceptions for academic and educational purposes. The tension between remembrance and risk highlights how complex it is to deal with the physical remnants of totalitarian regimes. Each recovered emblem transcends its status as an artifact. It becomes an acid test for how we confront the most sordid chapters of our history. Just beyond the grand emblems displayed in public, a far more personal layer of the Nazi legacy was hidden behind closed doors and inside the walls themselves. Domestic caches and time capsules. In the years following World War II, as Europe rebuilt itself from the wreckage of conflict, a new layer of the war began to emerge. One not found on battlefields but hidden within the walls of homes and government buildings. Across Germany and other former Axis-controlled territories, concealed caches have been uncovered during renovations, demolitions, and even flood cleanups. These time capsules, often stashed hastily in attics, basements, and behind false walls, offer a rare, intimate glimpse into the final days of the Nazi regime. One such example was found in 2021 in Hagen, Germany, where a history teacher discovered a sealed compartment inside his aunt's flood-damaged home. Inside was a disturbing collection: gas masks, Nazi medals, a revolver, brass knuckles, and a portrait of Adolf Hitler. The contents of these caches often reveal both the everyday and the extreme. Weapons, party armbands, uniforms, propaganda posters, ration books, and personal effects such as letters and photographs have been recovered, often in remarkable condition. These items paint a complex picture, not just of official Nazi operations, but of how deeply the ideology had permeated society. In some cases, caches include documentation from organizations like the National Socialist People's Welfare Agency, NSV, which was involved in social services but also benefited from the confiscation of Jewish property. The materials range from administrative files to children's books infused with anti-Semitic messaging, showing how the regime's reach extended into even the most domestic spaces. The hiding of these objects was almost never entirely random. In 1945, as Allied troops pressed into Germany, scores of civilians and Nazi officials made all efforts to conceal incriminating items. Some feared prosecution, others well-meaning diehards, awaiting a moment when the regime might again rise, and these items would be recovered. Many whole offices, or even entire households buried under Nazi paraphernalia, suddenly found themselves sealed up, surrendering to American or Soviet forces. Acts of personal preservation and ideological devotion then, massed in plaster and brick, rather than in some archival paper. Their reappearance, after decades, raises more questions than it answers about just how far the Nazi past had been washed away. Of course, these findings also emphasize the involvement of civilians and mid-level bureaucrats in sustaining and profiting from the Nazi regime. While the initial post-war focus was on the military heads and concentration camp officials, the objects found in domiciles and offices draw us to the broad involvement of society. Bureaucrats, teachers, social workers, and shopkeepers were participants or collaborators with the Nazi regime quietly but very significantly. The study and registration of these very personal time capsules remind us that history is not written by generals and dictators alone, but also by those who silently sustained their systems from within. The Nazi occupation layer. During World War II, the Nazis demonstrated not only a hunger for territorial expansion, but also a relentless drive to fortify those territories through any means necessary, even if it meant repurposing and desecrating ancient historical sites. One of the most compelling examples of this phenomenon is found on the island of Alderney, part of the British Channel Islands, where Nazi engineers constructed bunkers directly atop the remains of a well-preserved Roman fort known as the Nunnery. As the only British territory occupied by Germany, the Channel Islands were strategically important to the Nazis, who transformed them into heavily fortified strongholds. Rather than building around the Roman fortifications, the Germans chose to embed modern concrete bunkers into the ancient stonework, prioritizing strategic advantage over historical preservation. The construction methods used by Nazi engineers demonstrated a brutal efficiency. They blended centuries-old architecture with modern military needs, using Roman masonry walls as structural supports for their concrete bunkers. This integration often involved demolishing portions of the original ruins, removing ancient floors, and destroying medieval or Tudor-era additions. The Nazi-built Type 501 bunkers, standardized concrete shelters with reinforced walls, were often camouflaged within existing ruins, making them harder to detect from the air. In the case of the Nunnery, large parts of the Roman courtyard and original towers were obliterated to accommodate gun pits and sleeping quarters. These hybrid sites became eerie physical juxtapositions, ancient empires layered with modern dictatorship, stone and steel sharing the same footprint. The archaeological legacy left by these fortifications is large. In many cases, they destroyed irreplaceable historical deposits, erasing sections of Roman and medieval history forever. Excavation at Alderney and similar sites showed the violent disruption of history's layering, thousands of years of occupation compressed under a decade of militarization. In some cases, complete buildings had to be razed to leave nothing visible but the Nazi modifications. Archaeologists have to work back through the concrete and rusty rebar and try to reconstruct what once stood beneath. Invaluable for their information on World War II fortification strategies, these sites also serve as cautionary tales about how warfare can sap not only the present, but the past. Such fortified sites are more than just statements of physical violence. They are, rather, symbols of totalitarianism gone beyond just excess. The Nazis' aim was never just territorial conquest, it was the conquest of history, figuratively and literally. The Third Reich was literally trampling the legacies of former civilizations with its authoritarian footprint. It built on ancient foundations. The bunkers, now set in ancient stone, are a testament to a regime that wanted permanence with violence and sought to leave a mark not only in recent history, but deep into the layers of human civilization. Humanity in hiding. Beneath the surface of once bustling Jewish neighborhoods across Eastern Europe, a powerful form of silent resistance lay hidden for decades. Ceremonial objects, personal keepsakes, and household items buried by Jewish families facing Nazi persecution. In cities like Łódź, Warsaw, and Vilnius, archaeologists have unearthed caches of artifacts carefully wrapped in newspapers or cloth, buried in gardens, beneath floorboards, or under stoves. These were not random items, but cherished possessions intentionally hidden in the hope that they might one day be retrieved. In a Polish backyard outside the former Litzmannstadt ghetto, one such cache revealed nearly 400 items, including menorahs, perfume bottles, kiddush cups, and silverware, all hastily buried in 1939 as the Nazi presence closed in. These recovered objects speak volumes about the lives that were disrupted and destroyed. The items themselves are not extravagant. They are modest, functional, and deeply personal. A tarnished menorah or a simple Shabbat candlestick holds spiritual and cultural weight far beyond its monetary value. The careful wrapping of these items suggests that the owners believed they would return to reclaim them, that there would be a future in which Jewish life would continue. Some caches have also included religious texts, prayer shawls, and even handwritten letters, offering a rare, unfiltered glimpse into the final days of communities facing annihilation. These were not merely objects. They were lifelines to identity, family, and tradition. Very bruised were the supposedly trivial finds when uncovered in those relics. Each gives testimony of the faith kept under the most impossible conditions. Buried were these objects so as to resist, where the people of the world will not eradicate annals of Jewish culture, while its very essence was pursued for extermination. Sometimes, these relics would once again bear a name specifically to a family, forging history to present descendants for a brief revival of what the Holocaust had attempted to obliterate. Lighting the menorahs that were recovered from these caches during the current ceremonies of the Hanukkah season is an incredibly touching act, remembered in resilience, bringing life and light to symbols once buried in fear. Museums and memorial institutions are now instrumental in the preservation and interpretation of these artifacts. Institutions that have worked to conserve delicate materials include the Poland Museum in Warsaw and the Vilna Gaon Jewish State Museum. Items are displayed with sensitivity and integrated into larger narratives of the Jewish resistance and survival. These items are not simply historical curiosities. They are sacred remnants of an almost lost world. Their recovery and honoring not only save the history, but also serve to affirm the humanity of all those who quietly resisted so that they can survive and be remembered. Unexpected graves and battlefield relics. Beneath the forest floor, near former Nazi command centers, long after the gunfire ceased and the regimes collapsed, remnants of forgotten front lines continue to surface. One of the most chilling discoveries occurred near the ruins of Hermann Göring's villa at the Wolf's Lair in present-day Poland. In 2024, a team of archaeologists uncovered a shallow grave just 10 centimeters below the ground containing 5 skeletons, 3 adults, 1 teenager, and a newborn, all stripped of clothing and missing their hands and feet. The location, long believed to have been thoroughly examined by treasure hunters and historians alike, yielded a disturbing secret. The proximity of these remains to one of the most heavily fortified Nazi sites has raised deeply unsettling questions about who these individuals were and how they met their end. Personal artifacts and military field gear recovered alongside buried remains often provide crucial context to these discoveries. In some graves, items such as Wehrmacht dog tags, medical pouches, boot fragments, and handwritten letters have been found near or on the bodies. These belongings can illuminate the final hours of soldiers or civilians, whether they were slain in retreat, captured and executed, or died by taking their own lives as defeat loomed. In other cases, Soviet-issued items have been found mixed with German relics, suggesting chaotic clashes or field executions as lines blurred in the war's final months. These human traces add nuance to battlefield narratives, grounding large-scale conflict in individual human stories of fear, desperation, and lost identity. Forensic experts work hard at establishing the story behind these graves. Through DNA testing, analysis of bone trauma, and even by matching artifacts, they attempt to reconstruct identities and circumstances of death. Were they executed prisoners, fallen soldiers, or perhaps local civilians caught in the crossfire? Some specimens display evidence of such slayings: bullet wounds to the skull, tied hands, or bodies hastily dumped. It would reopen an investigation into possible war crimes, as local authorities and international historians revisit records, unit deployments, and testimonies. Such discoveries remind us that the confessions and many stories about World War II are unfortunately unfinished and buried in decades of silence and soil. The moral problems concerning the exhumation of graves are weighty. Looters and amateur relic hunters have gotten to a good number of such sites. Many of them have been disturbed and, in the process, valuable historical evidence destroyed. Some of those remains, when brought to light, instigate discussions as to whether their disposition should be with the decorum afforded to war graves, or whether, instead, urgency dictates that they are treated as forensic evidence in a potential crime. Preservation groups propose careful excavation, documentation, and memorialization, along with strengthening protection of known and suspected battlefield sites. This rediscovery of forgotten front lines carries not only historical importance, but ethical responsibility to honor the dead, uncover the truth, and prevent the loss of the past once more. As remains resurface in Europe half a world away, another trail of hidden history begins to emerge, one carefully packed, smuggled, and hidden in plain sight. The Nazi Trail in Exile. In 2017, Argentine authorities uncovered one of the largest caches of Nazi artifacts ever found in South America, hidden behind a false wall in a house on the outskirts of Buenos Aires. The discovery was made during a police raid that initially targeted art smuggling, but led to a stunning revelation of a secret room filled with over 75 Nazi-era items. Among the artifacts were a bust of Adolf Hitler, swastika-adorned harmonicas, military decorations, and disturbing medical instruments used for so-called racial measurements. Experts believe many of these objects were not simply memorabilia, but items of ideological significance brought over by fleeing Nazi officials after World War II. The condition and preservation of the items suggested they were considered valuable and possibly intended for future use or veneration. The cache included tools eerily similar to those used by notorious war criminals like Dr. Joseph Mengele, who escaped to South America after the war and lived under various aliases. Measuring instruments, used in pseudoscientific experiments to classify and discriminate by racial characteristics, bore a chilling connection to the atrocities committed in Nazi concentration camps. While no definitive proof ties the specific items to Mengele or Adolf Eichmann, another high-ranking fugitive captured in Argentina, the proximity of the discovery to known Nazi exile hubs and safe houses strengthens suspicions. Many of the artifacts match descriptions from post-war intelligence reports about materials smuggled out of Europe by members of the SS and Gestapo. The Nazi escape to South America was carefully orchestrated through ratlines, aided by Catholic Church sympathizers who provided Red Cross papers and funds. Under President Juan Perón, Argentina became a safe haven, welcoming fugitives carrying documents, valuables, and ideological relics. Some even smuggled artifacts, suggesting motives beyond survival, perhaps to preserve or revive the ideals of the Third Reich. Since the Buenos Aires raid, investigators and historians have worked to trace the origins of recovered items. While Argentine law bans public Nazi symbols, the case continues to raise questions about how to confront the legacy, calling not only for justice against those who fled, but accountability for the ideologies they brought with them. Thanks for watching. If these discoveries made you rethink what history hides, make sure to like the video, drop a comment with your favorite find, and subscribe for more untold stories from the past. Don't stop here. Click the next video on your screen to uncover even more hidden chapters of World War II.